Sometimes the very short ghost stories are the best. So here are a few I want to share with you, just to get in the Halloween spirit. Hope you enjoy it. Mommy told me never to go in the basement, but I wanted to see what was making that noise. It kind of sounded like a puppy, and I wanted to see the puppy. So I opened the basement door and tiptoed down a bit. I didn't see a puppy, and then Mommy yanked me out of the basement and yelled at me. Mommy had never yelled at me before, and it made me sad and I cried. Then Mommy told me never to go in the basement again, and she gave me a cookie. That made me feel better, so I didn't ask her why the boy in the basement was making noises like a puppy, or why he had no hands or feet. When my sister Betsy and I were kids, our family lived for a while in a charming old farmhouse. We loved exploring its dusty corners and climbing the apple tree in the backyard. But our favorite thing was the ghost. We called her Mother because she seemed so kind and nurturing. Some mornings Betsy and I would wake up, and on each other's nightstands we'd find a cup that hadn't been there the night before. Mother had left them there, worried that we'd get thirsty during the night. She just wanted to take care of us. Among the home's original furnishings was an antique wooden chair, which we kept against the back wall of the living room. Whenever we were preoccupied watching TV or playing a game, Mother would inch that chair forward, across the room towards us. Sometimes she'd manage to move it all the way to the center of the room. We always felt sad putting it back against the wall. Mother just wanted to be near us. Years later, long after we had moved out, I found an old newspaper article about the farmhouse's original occupant, a widow. She murdered her 2 children by giving them each a cup of poisoned milk before bed. Then she hung herself. The article included a photo of the farmhouse's living room, with a woman's body hanging from a beam. Beneath her, knocked over, was that old wooden chair, placed exactly in the center of the room. Did it get colder in here, or is it just me? Last night, a friend rushed me out of the house to catch the opening act at a local bar's music night. After a few drinks, I realized my phone wasn't in my pocket. I checked the table we were sitting at, the bar, the bathrooms, and after no luck, I used my friend's phone to call mine. After 2 rings, someone answered, gave out a low, raspy giggle, and hung up. They didn't answer again. I eventually gave it up as a lost cause and headed home. I found my phone laying on my nightstand, right where I left it. My daughter woke me up around 11:50 last night. My wife and I had picked her up from her friend Sally's birthday party, brought her home, and put her in bed. My wife went into the bedroom to read while I fell asleep watching the Braves game. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging my shirt sleeve. "Guess how old I'm going to be next month?" "I don't know, beauty," I said as I slipped on my glasses. "How old?" She smiled and held up 4 fingers. "It is 7:30 now. My wife and I have been up with her for almost 8 hours. She still refuses to tell us where she got them." I don't know why I looked up. When I did, I saw him there. He stood against my window. His forehead rested against the glass, and his eyes were still light, and smiled a lipstick-red, cartoonish grin. He just stood there, in the window. My wife was upstairs sleeping. My son was in his crib, and I couldn't move. I froze, and watched him looking past me through the glass. Oh, please no, his smile never moved, but he put a hand up, and slid it down the glass, watching me, with matted hair and yellow skin, and his face through the window. I couldn't do anything. I just stayed there frozen, feet still in the bushes. I was pruning, looking into my home. He stood against my window. Don't be scared of monsters. Just look for them. Look to your left, to your right, under your bed, behind your dresser, in your closet. But never look up. She hates being seen. To celebrate their first year in university, 6 friends went camping in the wilderness. After driving for several hours from the nearest town, they discovered a lagoon nestled behind a cliff, ideal for diving. They set up camp in the woods nearby and spent the evening swimming in the warm, clear water. As the sun sunk below the trees, one of the friends went up to the highest point on the cliff and jumped off, while the other 5 watched. Their laughter slowly subsided as they waited for him to surface. It only took half a minute for them to dive in after their friend. Struggling and sputtering among the reeds in the lagoon, they searched hopelessly for him. Finally, they disentangled themselves and came up, but they never saw their friend again. Heartbroken, they returned to the city and passed a strange and lonely year, in which their only solace was the knowledge that they would return to the lagoon to honor the anniversary of their friend's death. A year passed, and they returned to the lagoon as a memorial, but as they approached, they saw their friend standing there, head bowed. Excitedly, they called to him and began running towards him, but he didn't turn. As they got closer, they called him more desperately, but still to no avail. With joy, they ran towards him, but stopped dead when they saw that not 1, but 5 crosses on the waterside. My wife was shaking me quietly. I looked around the cabin. The girls must have gone to bed. The fire had been burned down to embers. My glass of scotch was still in my hand. Something is tapping on the porch. Then I heard it too. I grabbed my axe and I lit the lantern. I opened the door expecting a raccoon or a skunk, but instead found a boy of about 10 years old. He stared at me, petrified for a moment, then bolted down the path through the woods. I gave chase. He was losing me, but I heard him tumble to the ground. I leapt on top of him in a rage. "Why were you knocking on my porch?" I screamed. "My uncles told me to," he stammered. I was no longer angry, but confused. "But why?" I asked. "To get you out of the cabin." Any day now, she'll say her first words. My wife and I have been playfully betting on what she'll say first. Mama or Daddy. I can hear my wife crooning over and over while she feeds her. Mama's little girl. Mama loves you so much. Sometimes she's not even subtle about it. Say Mama. Come on. Say Mama. I don't mind it though. I still believe I'll win. When we first brought her home, she would scream and cry, and nothing my wife would say could calm her down. But I knew just how to hold her to help her fall asleep. Our daughter was always a daddy's girl. My wife needed all the handicaps she could get. I sit our daughter in her chair and my wife and I begin babbling like chickens. Mama, Daddy, say Mama. Who's Daddy's baby? I pull a gag from our little girl's mouth. Please, what do you want from me? Please let me go. My wife's smile falls from her face. With a heavy heart, put the gag back in as the girl starts to scream. Take her back to the room, locking her in and shutting the lights out. When I return, I find my wife crying. It's okay, honey, I tell her. The next one will be better. I promise. He had been given the watch on his 10th birthday. It was an ordinary gray plastic wristwatch in every respect, except for the fact that it was counting down. That is all the time you have left in this world, son. Use it wisely. And indeed he did. As the watch ticked away, the boy, now a man, lived life to the fullest. He climbed mountains and swam oceans. He talked and laughed and lived and loved. The man was never afraid, for he knew exactly how much time he had left. Eventually the watch began its final countdown. The old man stood, looking over everything he had done, everything he had built. 5. He shook hands with his old business partner, the man who had long been his friend and confidant. 4. His dog came and licked his hand, earning a pat on the head for its companionship. 3. He hugged his son, knowing that he had been a good father. 2. He had kissed his wife on the forehead, one last time. 1. The old man smiled and closed his eyes. Then nothing happened. The watch beeped once and turned off. The man stood standing there, very much alive. You would think that in that moment he would have been overjoyed. Instead, for the first time in his life, the man was scared. Thank you guys so much for listening to Origin, and I hope you enjoyed this special Halloween episode. And don't freak, in 2 weeks we'll be back with a regular, normal episode. Hope you guys have a happy Halloween, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.